contours of the new U.S. security strategy. We look to the internal political dynamics of the President Trump's administration and to the broader reconfiguration of global power relations. This year is a decisive one for the U.S. Republican Party, as we know, with midterm elections approaching and growing domestic criticism of President Trump's governance. At the same time, key figures within the Republican strategic camp, including voices such as former Senator Marco Rubio and actual Secretary of State, have long argued that the United States must adopt a more assertive posture in the Western Hemisphere, particularly in response to China's rapidly expanding influence across Latin America. Against this backdrop, Venezuela becomes not only a national crisis, but a strategic test case of U.S. leadership, of the future of international law and intervention norms, and of how global power competition will increasingly be played out in regions that were once considered peripheral to great power rivalry. The implications extend for beyond Latin America. They touch on possible U.S. disengagement from other regions, the risk of deepening polarization within the Latin American political space, and the evolving practice of international law in an era of strategic confrontation. Also important development that the U.S. carries out similar important actions without any consultation with its NATO allies. Let's explore together these dynamics in depth to assess their legality, political logic, regional and global consequences, and to ask whether we are witnessing the first concrete steps of a new US geopolitical doctrine, if not even a new global paradigm shift that may reshape the international order itself. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, Dr. Efraín Vázquez-Vera. Dr. Efraín Vázquez-Vera is a Puerto Rican international relations scholar, senior international consultant, and professor at the University of Puerto Rico at Humacao, where he has also served as a chancellor. He holds a PhD and a master's degree in international relations from the Complutense University of Madrid and University of Granada, Spain. He is a graduate of Spain's diplomatic school as well. His career combines academic leadership, high-level public service, and diplomatic practice. He played a key role in the creation of the Organization for Eastern Caribbean States Diplomatic Academy and has trained diplomats and officials across the Caribbean region. Dr. Vázquez-Vera has also represented Puerto Rico internationally as head of mission in the Dominican Republic and as honorary consul for several Eastern Caribbean states. In recognition of his academic and diplomatic contributions, he has been decorated by the King of Spain with both the Order of Civil Merit and the Order of Isabella the Catholic, or Isabella Católica in Spanish. So it sounds better in Spanish, actually. Isabella Católica. Or La Católica, I don't know exactly. Well, now, dear Efraín, if I may, because we know each other quite a long time and are very good old friends. So let me to address you like to the friend. Efraín, please, let's start talking about the subject, about the issue. I prepared several questions for you, and I tried to be as much as to covering as wider as possible questions regarding the Venezuelan case, because this is not the case. We understand that has impact only on Venezuela-US relations, but this is much wider thing, and
Yes.
that's described in my introduction. Let me to start with the first set of small questions about situation and the operation itself. And what, from your perspective, what is the strategic objective behind the recent US action and actions, saying this is not just uniquely the operation for capturing the so-called president, I would say, because I don't consider neither legitimate president of Venezuela.
No.
It is contradictory, of course, but I join this view. But all the actions which happens now between U.S. and Venezuela, U.S. strategic actions. There is another also important question: how would you characterize this operation as coercive diplomacy, or more concretely saying, regime containment, strategic signaling, or something else? Strategic signaling, I mean to Latin American states or to the world, anybody else? So this is first set of questions,
Okay.
and please go ahead. I'm listening with attention to you. Thank you.
Well, first of all, let me thanks the invitation to be here. For me, it's an honor and a pleasure, and a personal satisfaction to be here with you, a very good old friend. Okay. We need to, first of all, we need to make very clear that there is a long history or long tradition of U.S. interventions in Latin America and the Caribbean. And greeting from the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, okay? So in the tropics. So I'm very close to everything is happening right now. But there's a very long tradition. So this is not something new. Of course, in every time that the US have intervened in Latin America and the Caribbean is because they believe that their national interests are threatened. Okay, so that this is very easy to understand. This is not, it doesn't matter if you agree with them or not. Okay, if they really believe that is what is important. Okay, so in this case, in the case of Venezuela, what really they care about is the intervention, talking about interventions, the interventions of other superpowers of the world in the close area or the vital area or the backyard of the US, in this case of China, Russia, and in some sense also Iran, okay? So the Chavista government made a big mistake inviting Russia, China, and Iran in doing investments in Venezuela, especially in the oil industry. This is the reason. It's not about the oil, in the sense of the barrels. The problem here is the investment of China, Russia in the Venezuelan oil industry. For the US, they believe that this is unacceptable. And this is also a break of the rules of respect from the other superpowers to be so close in the backyard of the US. So, of course, the Chavista government made everything possible to make possible the intervention of the US. When this, I mean, the last election helps a lot in the US approach to intervene into Venezuela. Also, the violation of human rights in Venezuela helped a lot, and the autocratic style of government of the de facto president, okay, Nicolás Maduro, so made more easy for the US to intervene. If you see around in Latin America, no one came out defending Maduro, okay? Uh, because everybody knows that Maduro is not a legitimate president. He also is a dictator or autocratic leader. So this is not about Maduro. This is about these investments of superpowers in Venezuela. This is why the US is saying all the time that now the US companies are going to invest in the oil industry in Venezuela. We need to remember that Venezuela has the biggest reserves of oil in the world. Despite that, okay, they are not enjoying the benefit of having these natural resources.
I'm
The
sorry,
Venezuelan,
you are telling enjoying the benefits. You are telling about people of Venezuela. I see.
no,
I see.
no, and also the government, because the
The
quantity
government of the
that they
country.
export is not what represents the quantity that they have in reserves. You
Okay.
need to understand that the Venezuelan oil is a very special one. Is what is called the very heavy oil, dense
Yes.
oil. It has a lot of sulfurs and metallic components. So they need to be refined in a very special way that is very expensive. But despite this, the Venezuelan oil is very important for different sectors in the industry. Okay, so it's something that is very needed. Okay, this is why China and Russia, they are over there. And they don't, and the Venezuela government, they doesn't have the money to invest in the development of oil, the industry in Venezuela. It's a statement. There's some kind of estimates that to bring the Venezuela industry, oil industry, to a big level, they need $100 million that they don't have. So the U.S. is saying, okay, we are going to put this money, and I believe also that the U.S. makes some kind of arrangement with Russia and China in this sense, meaning that probably the investments that already are there and the buying of oil they are doing there, I believe that the U.S. told Russia and China that that their investment will be returned and they will continue getting oil from Venezuela. What the US don't want is the control of the industry. Okay. And this is not something new. We saw it in the Panama Canal. Okay. Where there was a lot of investment of China in the Panama Canal, and the US stopped that, asked the Panamanian government to
Yeah.
get rid of that investment, and the Panamanian government was more intelligent than Maduro, and they did it. So everything is fine now in Panama.
Yes, I'm sorry intervening. Yes, it just happened with the Trump's administration. I remember that's
Yes,
pressure
yes,
on
yeah,
Panama's
yes.
government. And
So
finally, Trump achieved his goal regarding Panama, as I see, right?
yeah, it's
So
an
the
amazing.
Chinese investments in Panama ports and in the channel itself, they were withdrawn already?
No, they're not. This is no means that China will not be using the Panama Canal, or they will have, their own area to storage. It doesn't mean that. It means that the control of this investment will not be allowed. But at the same time, they will permit China to use the canal,
To use
as
the
they
facility.
will permit China to get oil, but they need to pay it for it, okay? To use the oil in Venezuela. And this is a kind of new and old strategy of the US to the region. So it's like a new and old, all in one sense, old because always, the US has been intervening in the region, and with the famous Monroe Doctrine, that is called Monroe because the president at that time, I think that was the fifth president of the US, James Monroe,
Yes,
was
yes.
the one who presented the Doctrine Monroe, that we can summarize like America for the Americans, okay? So everybody else from around the world get out. But you know what, Kaha? It was not Monroe who wrote the doctrine. It was James Quisling Adams that later
Yes,
became
yes, yes. I
president
have
too.
heard about it. Yes.
So it's
It comes
amazing
from
because
third
in the
president, I think, right?
uh-huh, uh-huh.
Third
Yeah,
president.
and in the press conference, the first press conference after the Venezuela intervention, Trump very openly renew the Monroe Doctrine. Okay, this is it's not that the Monroe Doctrine disappeared or was sleeping. No, no, it's like some kind of putting again into force, and this is the new aspect of that. Okay, so you know how is President Trump? He's very openly. He says what he means. He do what he means and thinks, and he say things differently. Sometimes we don't understand what he means. Thanks God we have Marco Rubio that later he clarified some details. But this is not something new, but at the same time is something new. And let me add another fact that is new, is what you mentioned before, coercive diplomacy. Okay?
Yes,
At this
yes.
moment, there are not troops in Venezuela. I mean, openly. Okay? They don't need that because they have showed already what they are capable of. So this is something new because in the past, maybe some troops were needed. And you will think that if you will say that we are going to govern a country, you must have people over there. Okay.
Absolutely. This is most important question. I think that I
Yes,
want
yes. This is the
just
key
saying,
issue
just
and the
saying that
implication for the world.
I was thinking that when President Trump said that we will run Venezuela, so this should have meant that there will be boots on ground, so that the
Yes.
United States would intervene directly and occupy parts, at least the capital, in order to rule the country. But what you say now, this is the answer on my question, and I wonder very much to know how he would like to rule the Venezuela without having any soldier in Venezuela, and through which instruments he will do this.
Is with they already show how they are capable to do things in Venezuela very clearly. Go over there and arrest the de facto president without any kills in the side of the US. This is amazing. And also look at the images of the helicopters. They were flying very low in Caracas, for sure. This is not possible without an agreement with some kind of treason from the Venezuelan side. Okay, so this is something that went very smooth, and only this is possible because someone there in Venezuela helped the Americans. Okay, and the Venezuelans know this. There are some people there, so they don't need to have troops there because they have already the Venezuelans that are going to do what the U.S. need. Um, this is not new also in history. We
Oh,
saw it in Germany after the Second World War, how the U.S. used ex-Nazi government officials
oh.
to govern Germany. We saw it in Japan too. Okay, this is very normal, and let's say very clearly, this is very the intelligent way to do things, to do the regime change. Because if you remember, Iraq was a disaster. They entered there, they put the soldiers, they end the army,
Oh.
they fire all
Remind me
the
that
government officials.
Jimmy Carter's failure there. I think it was Carter president, right?
What I mean in Iraq, no, was Bush.
No, in Iran. In Iran, I
In
was.
Iran, yes. So, but it was a total disaster in Iraq.
Yeah,
And
disaster.
also, let's remember that in 2002 there was a coup d'état to Hugo Chavez. Okay, that was a coup d'état that last like 47 hours. Okay, first of all, he was arrested and he was taken to the military base, but in 47 hours, he was back in the presidency. At that time, there was appointed a president from the opposition. His name was Pedro Carmona.
Uh-huh.
And the first thing that he did when he arrived to the presidency was to fire all Chavez government and also to end all laws of Chavism. And that's the reason why the coup d'etat lasts only 47 hours. When people saw that they will not have a work, they don't will have all the benefits that they had in the Chavism. When people saw that the economic benefits will not continue with this new government, they ended the government. So, very wisely, the US says, let's not do the same mistake of Iraq. Let's do not the same mistake of 2002. Let's see if we can manage with with some Chavista leaders over there. A conversations, must happen a lot before the arrest of Maduro. So some agreements, and from the moment the Chavista, in this case, the on charge president, that also is illegitimate too. The Daisy Delcy Rodriguez, Trump is saying, and Marco Rubio is saying that she's complying. She's complying with everything. Today, President Trump announced the suspension of the second wave of attacks because he's very happy with Delcy. It was
One question. You think that Delcy Rodriguez can decide everything now instead of Maduro? So I mean that what about the Fuerzas Armadas or the armed forces of Venezuela? What about of different factions inside of Chavistas parties and other powerful figures in Venezuela? Are they all in accord with Delcy Rodriguez, and she's really controlling the situation, and the Trump and Rubio can count on her words, on her promises fully?
Let me say that most of the Venezuelan people, especially Chavista officials, they still in shock. Okay,
Okay.
they can't believe at this moment today what happened. You know, to came and arrest Maduro in his house. This is something unbelievable. Also, they know that what happened will not happen without can happen without the help, the assistance of some people in Venezuela. So at this moment, they are in shock and they are waiting. Okay, they're waiting to see what is going to happen. Of course, inside the Chavismo, you have hardliners and you have also a group of reformers. And also there's a third group that are the survivals, people who want to survive no matter what they have right now, political power, economic benefits from the government. So at this moment, everybody is in shock and they are waiting about what is going to happen. If you see over there, that you have two kind of speech right now in Venezuela. The one that's still more or less like in the past, okay, long live to the revolution or whatever. But at the same time, there's some few speeches, especially with Delcy Rodriguez, who sounds different. And I'm sure that there's a third one. And the third one is what she is saying personally to the US government. Okay. So they are buying time. Some people there in Venezuela, they are buying time. The army, I think, is the most important actor here in Venezuela. But you need to understand there have been a lot of years of Chavismo in Venezuela. A lot of young officers are indoctrinated with this idea of Chavism. So we can say that the Venezuelan army is in the side of the transition to another regime. I believe that most of the army, especially the young officers, are in the side of Chavism. But they are pragmatic. They want to survive. Of course, they don't want to confront militarily to the US. They know that they don't have that capability, but also they are looking to keep their jobs and to have a peaceful transition. And transition, what it means is a new elections with guarantees. That's what it means, transition. And whatever governments came from that elections, but must be very free elections, not like the last one. Okay,
Yeah,
so
by the way, I
Chavismo have
just
a hope
okay.
that maybe in that election they can win freely. Okay, so let's see what is going to happen.
Yeah, by the way, I have heard just yesterday, I think it was that the more clear messages about the possible elections
Mhm.
were aired. So, and including, if I'm not mistaken, from Delcy Rodriguez also saying that there will be elections.
There will be election.
And the second thing, which little bit sounds strange to me, that everybody were expecting that after this intervention of US and kidnapping or bringing to justice, as US officials say, the Maduro, the many people believe that immediately U.S. administration will establish contacts with opposition, with Machado,
Marina Corina.
Marina Colina, yes, and and after that the opposition will start playing
Yes.
some role, will become protagonistas, so-called, no?
Mhm.
Protagonist in this situation, at least the third part. So up to now, there is no any sign that the opposition has entered the game, and the talks are ongoing between Trump administration and Delcy Rodriguez. What do you think all about it? So
Well,
will the opposition be fully allowed to uh, to step in this process? And if opposition becomes closer to this all this process, then I think that they have quite a big chance in order to come to the power in the future.
mhm.
So
You
what
know,
goes on in this respect? What can you
one
say?
of the big problems with opposition right now is that Venezuelan opposition has always been divided. Okay, so there's a lot of oppositions to Chavism. Okay, historic, traditional ones, all political parties. But now we are only are talking about Marina Corina Machado because she won the the Nobel Prize. But let's remember that Marina Corina Machado was not the candidate of her group in the last election. So
Because she was not
she does,
allowed.
yes, she doesn't have a democratic mandate. Who has the mandate is Edmundo Gonzalez. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He looks very like a grandfather, person. Very he speak very smooth, slow, but so if you bring after what happened in Venezuela, if you bring the opposition, and with this I mean no Corina because that is not possible with Edmundo, it will be a disaster. It will be like an Iraq again, because he doesn't have he could probably won the elections. That's everybody thinks that he wants the election, that truly he wants. But the reality is he don't have the power to govern. I mean, he don't have any control into the army. into the old government infrastructure.
Or institution.
So this is why the reason the US told them, wait, you can get in. A lot of things must happen again. And also, it will be very bad for the opposition if very fast after the what happened, the arrest of Maduro, the opposition came back, assumed power. It will look like imposition from the US. So can you imagine starting being president of Venezuela because a foreign government brings you in? So it also doesn't look good. And I think what the strategy is let's work with Delcy. We always have the possibility of military actions in Venezuela. Delcy know it. Um, and let's wait, for a year or 2 years or 3 years to make that good elections. And then who won. So let me also mention that about the opposition, that first of all, it's not about bringing the exile. First of all, the first thing or the first goal with the opposition is to make them free, those who are in Venezuelan jails. And that started to happen yesterday, okay? This is very important. This is more important that the exile in the opposition in the exile. They are very, those who are in the US and Europe, they're fine and they can come back in any moment. So I expect in the next step, no very fast, that the opposition in exile can return to Venezuela because they need to return. They need to return to prepare themselves to the next election. So it will happen, but I think it will not happen very soon. But what we can conclude is that the political move of keep the opposition outside this possible mess because this is not, a lot of things can happen from this moment, okay? But to keep opposition out is wise. And let's see if Delcy Rodriguez is up to the moment and she's capable to do this transition so the opposition can get in again in Venezuela and have very free elections in Venezuela. And that will end the transition, okay? I don't expect, Caja, sorry, I don't expect, that Trump and Marco Rubio is saying that we need to recover the oil industry as soon as possible. This is not going to happen very soon, okay?
Yeah.
It's a lot of investments and it will take years to do that, okay?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So probably what they mean is that they want to start the process in a way that can't be go backyard. So no, I mean back again, and they start the process and then having elections so that the new government that came with that from these elections could end the process of the oil transformation industry with U.S. investments, no foreigner. What I mean U.S. investment also could be European investment, friendly allies from the U.S. No China, no Russia.
Well, very good, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for these clarifications. Now let we to ask this kind of question. How you see what will be the impact on U.S. policies towards whole Latin America or países iberoamericanos, as you say.
Yes,
It's not just it's not just Hispano-speaking countries, but there is also Brazil, for example,
Brazil. Okay.
which is the Portuguese
So
lingual group. But I mean, is really this beginning of a new policy towards Latin America, maybe old new policy, if you will be more inclined to this, to my view. So enforcing the policy which United States already had, then little bit lost, because saying frankly, the credibility of United States among the Latin American population was not very high last decades. And to my view, that was a very smart, I think, step from side of Trump to assign Rubio for dealing with whole Latin America, because he already started making his speeches and his interviews, also his entrevistas or his meetings with journalists, making in Spanish, in poor Castellano language. So I mean that I thought that most probably he tries via Rubio's factor to start influencing the Latin American population, to making the America more closer spiritually and things like that. Because saying frankly, the US and this Anglo-Saxon world is not very beloved by Latin American population. Up to now, it's still. Do you think that with this first harsh action, then US will be more and more active with other Latin American states and their governments using the same approach? So meaning that not changing the governments, not changing these regimes, but trying somehow to submit them under its rule.
Yes, as I mentioned before, this Venezuela intervention is not something new. So we here in Latin America, we are not surprised when these interventions happen. Okay, so this is something kind of normal in Latin America, in the Caribbean. If it's not military intervention, it's an economic intervention, political intervention. So this is something daily in Latin America in the relation with the US. The truth is that there are some political leaders in Latin America that try to explore other relations to put in a balance, in a way, with the US government. That is why Latin America is getting closer to China, to Russia, looking for this kind of balance, more independence from the US in the economic sense, okay? So what happened is that there are some Latin American governments who they have, openly be against the US interests in many ways, and that also opened the doors to China investments and Russia also investments. So what is important, what happened in Venezuela is the precedent, okay? So Trump just gave Latin America and the Caribbean the precedent and how the relations will be with the US. And what is going to happen if you don't behave with the US? If you threat the US interest in America. That is why this is important, okay? And we already have seen the output of this kind of policies that the US right now have. In the conversation yesterday with the president of Colombia, now they are friends. The president of Colombia has been the most vocal in anti-US policies in the region. The exchange of insults between Trump and president of Colombia has been, it's incredible, okay? But yesterday they talked by the phone, and there's an interview right now in the Spanish newspaper El País, that it sounds like right now they are friends. And this is what the US is looking, okay? And this is what, in the bigger picture of what is happening in Venezuela, the US is expecting to have, okay? So it's like saying, everybody, this is the precedent, this is going to be the tone. So don't go against US interests. Don't open your doors to China and Russia investments, and everything will be fine. And everything will be cool, as always. As always.
So when you speak about investments, you consider the big infrastructural projects, for example, the Chinese stakes in, for example, different ports or railways or this kind of big mega projects, which usually
Also in
China
agriculture, big
in
investment in
order to have a
agriculture and
leverage on
mining.
the governments of the
Yeah,
countries.
yes.
Yes. So you mean that finally US will achieve that no Chinese big investments will be present at the Latin American soil?
Yes, what I'm very worried is that I don't believe that the US have the capacity to invest like the Chinese or Russians in Latin America and the Caribbean. Because Latin American countries at this moment, they can't. So they can get the investment necessary to develop, ports, agriculture. And so this is why some Latin American countries are looking to other investments. So the question is, the US will be able to substitute these investments in Latin America? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So the UN, so then the conclusion is that if the US wants to get rid of China and Russian investment in Latin America, the US must find partners to do these investments. What I'm worried is that possibly the prospect investment will came from Europe. But right now, the relation between Europe and the US not are in the best level of they're not in good relation right now,
Yeah,
especially with this Greenland situation. You see?
yeah, absolutely. This is a little bit strange, even saying that in such a situation of crisis, and anyway, whatever success United States had with this operation in Venezuela, this is still a crisis, right? Which should be resolved. And in this situation of crisis, US government starts a new crisis with Europe because of Greenland, which is, it's not just fantastic idea. It's a little bit surrealistic idea to my view to take up by force or even by pressure Greenland. But this is another topic, of course. We will not be talking about this. But what you say, it's absolutely reasonable that United States needs Europe not only just as a security partner, but as an economic partner and as a political partner, even dealing with the Western Hemisphere. But most probably, the Trump has much more ambitions that capacity, and he thinks that U.S. will be able alone to satisfy the needs of whole Latin America. I mean, these organizational needs and financial needs and many other things, technological or technical, etc., and to
Mhm.
stabilize the Latin America without participation of other Western countries. And this is not only Europe, I think. There may be also Japan, South Korea, and other democratic countries, which usually have been very good partners to US before. But let's see what you say about this.
See, I am also worried that's not at this moment we are talking about the different perspective futures that could happen, okay? But the thing is that I'm personally worried that this president of Venezuela will not be successful in a way. If the hardliners in Venezuela do something to to end the plans from the U.S. in Venezuela. This is so everything that we are saying right now, we are hoping that everything gets smooth, okay, and without any violence in Venezuela. But something can happen. I don't believe that the hardliners in Venezuela will take it that easy. It's too good to be true, okay, what is happening right now in Venezuela. So I'm worried about that. Um, but what we are going to expect if something get, without violence, is that Latin America is going to change the tone with the US,
Okay.
and they will look for other partners of investment, not to create a condition or the excuses from the US to make some kind of interventions. That is going to happen. But this is have very also big implications for other superpowers and also for the world, because what it means is that at this moment, superpowers will have their vital space, their area protected, and with other superpowers incapable of getting in. So it's like this is the most important issue of what is happening in Venezuela. The implications for the near future in the world. What did this means? This means that other superpowers will do the same thing in the
In their
backyard
neighborhood.
areas. This
Yes.
is I think this is the important issue, and I can say that probably here is an agreement with the U.S., Russia, and China, in the sense that Russia, you will continue with your space of influence. I will not get in. China, you will do the same thing, and I will do the same thing. So, and we are going to respect each space of everyone. This is what worries me is more, because it will hurt a lot what is international law. And we must not forget that international law is important. Okay, what happened in Venezuela was a violation of international law. Only violence or military action can be taken with the authorization of the Organization of the United
Security Council.
Nations, or only in self-defense. And this is not the case of Venezuela. So this is worrying me a lot. Okay, of course, in our conversation, we understand why it happened, but it doesn't mean that now everybody can do it around the world. So can you imagine now every country can go to the courts, to the judicial system, declare someone is whatever, and then go into that country, arrest that person, bringing it back. So it will be a totally chaos. So I hope that this is not the case, because then we will see another world that we're having right now. So as a conclusion, at this moment, we have the same world that we have been living in, but it could turn another world if everybody does the same thing. So this, in the case of China and Russia specifically, I think that there's understanding, okay, no written understanding with the U.S. and how these few years are going relations be. Probably can create a safer place, a safer world, if these rules are respected. But we will see what is going to happen. I don't know if you agree with me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's very early to say whether I agree or anybody else agrees with what you say or not, because we understand that the situation is very chaotic and very difficult to see absolute truth. But the versions you are now providing here are very credible, of course, and very strong. So, and for me, it's most important in your insight. You see the things from Caribbean basin saying, and you see from the also soul is important. To my view, the Latin American countries belong, majority of them, to the emotional societies. So
Mhm.
if I consider that Anglo-Saxon world or European space is a more place of a rational politics, uh, predominantly everything is mixed up, of course. And I made article about this, so I'm very now enthusiastic about this kind of visions. So, but Latin American is very emotional, so it's very difficult to predict as you said about these Chavistas, which you worry about whether they will agree with the situation. At this moment, they're calm because there is such a shock that they're under this shock, but we don't know what they will do in 1 month, for example, when they come out of this shock. And their emotional vision of things may not be possible to subordinate to a rational thinking. America even comes with very rational and very beneficial propositions or the suggestions. They may not be taken by emotional. For example, the people from Venezuelan ruling party, etc. So, but I want to ask you what happens because Latin America is very diverse, I understand, but there are type of Chavistas governments as well, right? Like Cuba, and we know Nicaragua, and in some other countries are quite strong parties also following this, and this Sendero Luminoso, so-called the Chinese type Maoistas and others exist still in Bolivia, in other countries of Latin America, less in Argentina maybe, but they're in Chile as well or any other countries. So what do you think, what will be the US approach towards the Cuba in this case, and other this kind of Sandinistas and this kind of governments?
You mentioned before, very correctly, that Latin America at this moment is very polarized. Okay, so we have governments that are very pro-US, very pro-US capitalism and everything, but then you have other governments in a spectrum of the left. And what I mean spectrum is that you have different things there. Okay, you have very left people, very left government, at least in their speech, okay?
Okay.
For example, Nicaragua, Cuba, Brazil, also Colombia. They are very traditional left countries in a way, but but in this spectrum of the left in Latin America, they're very different. You find some criminal governments over there, and really true, like digamos, criminal in the sense of dictatorships, they don't respect human rights and everything. For me, the worst is Nicaragua. Okay, so Nicaragua at this moment is a mafia style
It's
country.
even
Okay,
worse than Cuba, you say, right?
yeah, yes, of course. So,
Absolutely.
Cubans are more rational. I know Cuba. I wish them the best. Everybody wants a more democratic, a more free Cuba. Who doesn't want that? Okay, but in the case of Nicaragua, that's another thing. I
No
mean,
way. No
that's
way.
that's more or less the case of Venezuela in a sense. Okay.
Okay.
Um, in and I'm really worried about what is going to happen in Nicaragua. And of course, um, Ortega, the president, I don't see him changing his attitudes, his policies, and I will say that Nicaragua could suffer a lot because this bad relation between Nicaragua and the U.S. But then you saw what happened in Colombia, okay? And we can see that that's a good thing, see, and the president of Colombia, he also is very pragmatic, but in the case of Nicaragua, I don't see coming that, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
In the case of Cuba, it's very, for me, unique, particularly. I don't see what happened in Venezuela happening in Cuba. And the reason of that is because you don't have an internal opposition in Cuba, okay? You have a lot of unhappy people, but you don't have people there organized. You don't have leaders of the opposition in Cuba. And the US also is
Actually,
very
because
worried.
it is not possible, I think, right? The
Yes, yes.
regime
I
doesn't
think
allow any multi-party activities, right?
yes, yes. Cuba is the case that all change and all transitions must came from inside. And what I mean inside is the Cuban government. This is the safe way to do it. Remember, the US doesn't want a political crisis in Cuba because Cuba is 90 miles from the US coast, and they don't want violence that could create a migration wave to the U.S. So everybody wants better things to Cuba, but for me, the strategic way to do it is to end the U.S. blockade. Okay, so if you end the U.S. blockade in Cuba, then I believe that it will be a more, a lot of opportunities to advance in reform in Cuba, and that Cuba can achieve what we want from them. Okay, so it's not the case of Venezuela, uh, but what I look more similarly is Nicaragua. Okay,
Uh-huh.
that, what is the problem? Why is not happening in Nicaragua before, or why it is not going to happen in Nicaragua soon? That Nicaragua doesn't have strategic importance from the U.S. to the U.S. Nicaragua doesn't have the oil industry. Um, so everything can change if Nicaragua made a mistakes. So what we can expect from Nicaragua is some kind of containment, not to make a mistake, so can allow the U.S. To intervene. And let me see, a lot of people were very happy with the U.S. intervention in Venezuela. I'm not the one who is happy because, as I told you before, I respect a lot of international law. What
Yes.
I what I want now is that everything gets through smoothly to a transition to a democracy. That's what I want. But a lot more of people will be get very happy if there's a regime change in Nicaragua. What is happening in Nicaragua right now is very ugly. Uh,
I'm sorry, Efrain. I remember that there was a regime changed in Nicaragua. Daniel Ortega was the president, then it was changed, and it started its democratization again,
yeah,
but it
yes,
failed. Don't you think that United States was not operational enough or wise enough to support democratization in Nicaragua? But that time, that Ortega was not able to come back to the country again. So if US would have supported, like
yes.
usually, for example, EU does different policy in its neighborhood. It
Mm-hmm.
starts immediately any move towards democracy in any country, and the EU is there and tries to support the modernization to the normative change in the countries, etc. But I see that the US policy in this regards is little bit different. If there is no very close pragmatic benefit, it doesn't, it didn't care, at least up to now, very
Mm-hmm.
much about the political future of the countries and the
Yes.
transformation of countries. So if we come to the global question in this regards, the difference between US and EU approaches to the neighborhood, for the moment, of course, it's very geopolitical question whether the US should govern or not the Western Hemisphere. This is purely geopolitical and paradigm which is very far from that EU uses. EU also wants to govern, that EU governance, such term exists, you know very well from your Spanish education, of course, that EU governance, but EU governance is not about domination. EU governance is about helping in transformation and participating in the changes in the countries, right? Uh, don't you think that US is very different and inefficient in this regard? And that's why happened these kind of things like happened with Nicaragua. that once the country on the way of democratization came back towards the autocracy again.
Yes, yeah, you're right. We have in the past U.S. governments that they really don't care about Latin America and the Caribbean. They are more worried about what is happening in Asia or Europe. So the Caribbean was not important for them. And that gave some people in Latin America the space to gain in power and to stay. And of course, it's a bad thing. What I'm going to say is that, and I don't want to be misunderstood, is that really when you see the U.S. interest in Latin America and the Caribbean right now, is U.S. interests, okay? National security interest, okay? If you don't threat that, you can do whatever you want. So the U.S. really is not into the work of promoting democracy. Of course, they want to use more democratic countries in Latin America, but that's not the priority. Okay, that sounds good,
What I'm saying as well.
promoting democracy, but the really thing here is that the U.S. doesn't want the U.S. interests, the national security issues to be threatened by their neighbors, okay, by their space. So this is why there's going to be a containment in Latin America. They are not they don't want to get upset the U.S., but really I don't see the U.S. dealing with or in an enterprise of promoting democracy around the region. There's only a specific issues of democracy in the region. So this is not really a big issue right now. For them, it's only that you care about the U.S. interests and you don't threat that. If you don't do that, you are morally free to do whatever you want. And that's what is going to happen right now. But it's true, especially the government of Biden and Obama, they forgot about Latin America and they create this, in a way, instability situation. Okay. So uh, remember, the Trump government, the Trump administration is only starting. Okay. We have more years. And we also need to understand, of course, if Trump have more 3 years of government, but after that, Trump probably will not be the president. So he can be. But the ideas, these policies of the US that are now information, okay, this new way to do things, they're going to continue. I'm not expecting to end of these policies after Trump. Probably will continue, and they have a big support in the U.S. Also, you need to remember that very soon there are going to be the mid elections in the U.S. And all these actions in Venezuela and other countries, where it helps a lot the Trump supporters. And even some Democrats like this kind of action of the US in the region. So it's related also to this midterm election. Trump needs Congress, Republican Congress. It will be a disaster for him to have a Democrat Congress that not allowed to do the things that he wants. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, that is very interesting. So we overpassed a little bit 1 hour, but I think that many interesting things were discussed, and I would still like to talk few minutes with you at least, at least. So, what is interesting that what you do you believe that in the future? So as this is about, of course, more belief than in rational vision. It's difficult to envisage what will happen, but to my view, at this moment, Latin America is a very potentially very strong region, of course. growing in population and economically also. And there are so many things. There is big poverty as well, of course, many contradictions. But in these contradictions, if we go to the Hegelian views, philosophical views, so out of contradictions, you will get some new quality. And of course, the Trump's intervention could become a trigger to this kind of changes in Latin America. So do you believe that the South America can become predominantly democratic space? And because as we see that these many autocratic regimes tried, including China and Russia, tried to establish themselves in Latin America. They will not be helpful in transforming Latin America into a democratic space or the countries, democratic countries. But US could do this with the assistance of EU, as you said, but there is also Canada, very democratic and country in the region. And Mexico is becoming more and more democratic, to my view. I don't know, maybe not very well the Mexican context, but as it sounds at this moment, so there are many big changes there. So do you believe that the Latin America will go on the way of democracy? And you've been talking about Trump's term. If we don't consider Trump as a big supporter of democratization, we understand this, of course, but Trump will change, of course. And the Republicans themselves, not only Democrats, but also Republicans from inside, may also evolve, or may also some evolution can take place there as well. So do you think, do you believe in this democratic future of the Latin America, or you think that this will stay as a country of, like described by big writers like Garcia Marquez or Vargas Llosa and others? So this is space for autocrats, for dictators, and for very big emotional clashes of civilizations, etc.
Well, I hope, and there are countries that are working on it. Okay, you have very good examples of good democracies in America Latina, and also in the Caribbean. And when I mean the Caribbean, I mean Eastern
Dominica,
Caribbean
República
countries.
Dominicana, for example.
Yeah, no, Eastern Caribbean countries are very democratic and have very high levels of development. You think about Barbados, St. Lucia. They are the small countries in the Caribbean,
We
but they
don't
are,
know a lot about them. This is the
yeah,
problem.
but they're very, very, very democratic. You also have in Central America, you have Panama is achieving very well democratic society, Costa Rica, Guatemala is in the road. Honduras and Nicaragua has problems. But when you see all these countries and why they can achieve democracy as the highest level that they can, it is related to the institutions of their country. You need to remember that all Latin American countries started in the 19th century, and they create a state, and they create an administration. And these states and this administration of these new states in the 19th century, they were governed by the elites, the Creole elites, whites in these countries, okay? And the problem is, and that's why they're very autocratic, and they
Elitist.
have an appearance of democracy, but the way they see life, daily life, and how government works, it benefits these elites. This is the problem. So the biggest impediment to the development of democracy is of Latin American is the model of the state is an old model of the 19th century. These form of states that benefit a few ones have been not reformed. So when you see Latin America, what you see right now probably is more or less the same that was created in the 19th century. And What I mean is that to get a good democracy in America Latina, in Latin America, you need to reform the state and how it works, how benefits, and and probably when you hear a lot that the economic problems, the poverty in Latin America, the guilt are others outside their country, no? Oppression, the blockades, the US, the intervention. But the truth is that most of the situations in Latin America, it comes from inside. The inside is how the state was created, how it works, how it benefits only a few people over there. And that's what is must be a reform to see democracy. So the answer is you will see the same if reforms don't came in. So when you mean Venezuela, what is happening right now, I means transition. It's not only the election. After the election, they need to reform the state. When you see Nicaragua, it's not only that no, Ortega gets out and then you do elections. No, wait. We need to do a new reform of the constitution, a modern, more effective state. That's what is needed. More that change of regime is a new frame to construct democracy. Okay, when you see Cuba, it's not about changing the regime only. So you change the regime, what it means to get rid of one person and then another, maybe worse, came. No, it's not about that. It's about reform. And I think that in Latin America, they have the capacity to do a new constitutions, to design a new government, but it's very hard. It's very hard. I think that the best example one what I'm talking about is Mexico. Okay, I love Mexico in all senses, but over there, what you have is a 19th century state. That's the truth.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
Yes, and you can imagine what I mean. Okay, you see like some kind of feudalism over there.
Oh, really?
And people who are not in politics or government, but are the ones who govern the state or the towns and the regions. And Mexico needs a big reforms of the state. So I will appreciate if Latin America, instead of blaming someone about what is happening in the countries. And Latin America will, because where you say, no, we are emotional. So it was Caja's fault because we have this situation. And we need to start looking into the inside about how can we be better, okay? And of course, we will find a lot of allies to make these transformations and change, but it's not easy. It's not easy because there are a lot of people who have a lot of economic power, political power. They don't want to change because they live from it. They live from the system that they have.
So you
Uh,
you you think that this is civilizational issue,
yeah, yeah,
and maybe Huntington was right that saying that you cannot just change civilization, making democratic because democracy is a civilization as well. So democratic world is a
yeah. It's a culture.
and
It's a culture, a political culture.
you
Yes.
cannot force, for example, Latin American states to become democratic as far as this is not in their blood. This is not
Hmm.
a civilizational sign. But I think we should not also think that some countries are condemned to live in these conditions that they live. For example, Iran, which for years was in such conditions of this Islamic State, now can change finally. And I still always bring this kind of belief that nobody is condemned to continue living in a way it used to live for centuries.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is what I think about Latin America. So it should be difficult. And understanding from your point of view, of course,
It's difficult, but you see good examples of that
yeah,
happen.
Yes.
Say in the case, for example, of Uruguay, we can say also Chile. There
Or
are states, of
Argentina
course,
also is
Brazil
changing, I
also
think.
too. You see that, in Brazil is a good place. So, but then you have others that, and if you see the Caribbean, in the all range, you have
Yeah.
good examples of democracies there. So it's achievable, but the elites, the traditional historical elite of some countries, they will not allow it. Are people who lives from this
Yeah.
and made their fortune from this, and they want to be all powerful, and these people will not allow that to happen. So, the Chavism is the son of what is the old regime was in Venezuela. Uh, and right now you have a state that is all Chavista. How you reform that? And can you imagine if Edmundo Gonzalez arrived the next day or the rest of Maduro? It
Yeah.
would be a disaster, because it's not that easy. When you mean transition, sometimes it doesn't mean to change faces. It
Yeah.
means also very deep reforms in the state. And without that, it will continue in other phases, in another way. Populism is from the right and could be also from the left, and that's the truth.
Absolutely.
So, but it's a big challenge, and let's hope, from all these disasters
Um,
that occur in Venezuela and all these new policies, something good we can get from it, and I hope that will be better in the future.
I think just saying that, I think that uh, your partial pessimism about the possibility of changes, and because you see from inside what are the difficulties, and I understand this.
Yeah, yes,
Uh,
and you know this also too, you
yeah, yeah,
know?
yeah, absolutely. But of course, I'm looking from distance to this,
Okay.
and what I think that maybe you should be more demanding. I mean, democratic forces and democratically oriented people. Actually, the Puerto Rico is a part of United States, I understand, but in the same
No, it's
time,
not part. It's not part, Caja. It's a
it's
property of
it's
the
officially
U.S.
territory of United States.
Okay, okay.
But
It's
let's
a
see. No, no, no.
officially is a non-incorporated territory of the U.S. What that
Yeah,
means?
don't
Colony.
go
Okay,
emotional. Don't go
colony.
emotional. What I'm telling that, but actually by substance, you are part of the Latin American world.
Yeah, yeah.
and
On the
and
Caribbean world,
and
yes, true.
also in many things, also institutionally as well, because you have such close relations with all Caribbean states, and you are very much integrated with them, right? So you are in between. So you should see that United States as the biggest power and strongest power in the region should have brought this or taken this mission to help in democratic transitions, because what EU does in its region and in its neighborhood is all the time trying to democratize countries, to institutionally to develop them into the modernize them into the democratic way. But from US, I see that there is lack of this kind of ambition in Latin American space. And maybe the forces from Latin America should be more demanding towards US in this regards, to help, to finance, and
Yeah, 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 yeah. You
to
know,
give more resources, to dedicate more resources to the democratization. Well, I don't think the Trump administration will be doing this, absolutely, because the strategy is absolutely different from their
national
side.
security, U.S.
Yeah, but
interests.
but in long term, this would be absolutely necessary and
Yes,
must.
of course, the U.S. can help in a way, and also other countries, Europe, in Asia, uh, can help Latin America to get better in democracy aspect. But first of all, we need to deal with the problem that we have in Latin America and the Caribbean of being, of having this idea of democracy as granted. Okay, and
Yes,
not asking themselves what is a democracy, what it means, what do you really need what we can improve democracy. You know, in Latin America and the Caribbean, democracy is something granted. You say, we are a democracy, okay, it's done. We don't need to care more about democracy in our country because we are one. And people accept it. Okay, this is a very dangerous idea. I'm not. I don't see the U.S. Getting into critical role or leadership role in the region in promoting democracy. As we mentioned before, now the priorities is national interest, national security. And I'm not expect never that democracy will, you know, go into the first place and then national security to the second place. But what I'm hoping is that maybe in the US they start seeing a relation, very linked relation between national security, national interest with democracy. Okay? So I'm not saying that democracy here will be in the first, but at least democracy could be linked to the first one, no, to national security.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
that's what I, you know, hoping for the future that the U.S. will see an interest in promoting
Okay.
democracy, not only because democracy, you know, is because democracy reflect the national U.S. interests and national security. But in Latin America, we also need to do of work, no,
Yeah,
not giving granted democracy. Okay. Here in Puerto Rico, being a colony, and everybody believes and thinks that we are a democracy. When you go to the books, non-colony can be a democracy. Okay, so we don't have the last word here. It's only the U.S. We don't vote for the president, for the Congress in the U.S.
yeah,
So as you see, people here give granted democracy, but really they are not. And this happens a lot in Latin America. And democracy is not only having elections. Okay, it's
yeah.
something more. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. This is also a very interesting issue, but I think if we start talking about this theoretical thinkings about what is democracy, what not, what is democracy according to Latin American mentality, what is European democracy and others, we will go very far. Unfortunately, we have no so much time
Okay.
now at this moment. So I will conclude then our meeting. So first of all, thank you so much for your very interesting insight. Uh,
No,
you
thank you to you, Kaha. It was a
yeah,
pleasure
yes.
to be with you. Okay,
For
and I
us,
say hello to all Georgians also too. And I want to go to your country one day. Please ask Kaha to invite me because I want to see your wonderful country. I know it from you, but I haven't seen
absolutely,
personally.
yes,
Okay,
yes,
so
absolutely. And
thank you
thank you
very
very
much
much
for the opportunity.
for your also feelings towards Georgia and for your uh, emotional bound, I would say, to Georgia
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
I have it. I have it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks to
And
you, my
the
friend.
same I feel for Puerto Rico
Yes.
and for all Latin America as well.
Yeah.
For me, this is the amazing space.
Gracias, gracias.
This
Gracias, Caja.
amazing, and I wish, of course, you the prosperity. In a way,
Me too.
how you see democracy doesn't matter, but I want the people will be happy. Like
Thank you.
Gloria Estefan says, que la gente pueda bailar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. People in Georgia knows that you speak very
Yeah,
good Spanish. They know
and the
that.
people
They
would
know
be
it.
able to that because the dance for Latin Americans is something more
Ah,
than
okay.
just dance,
But
right?
but but I mean, your colleagues and people around you knows that you know a very good Spanish.
Well, some yes, some not, but doesn't matter. This is that
You are you
everybody
are
likes Spanish and
you are you
everybody
are you are
likes
more the most
Spanish word.
international guy, Georgian
Yeah,
guy
yeah,
that
yeah.
exists.
Everybody in
Caja.
Georgia respect very much and likes Spanish word. So and this goes to Latin American world as well. This is very exciting. The culture which is in Latin America for Georgians, it's something very close
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
emotionally and. So I really thank you so much. I
Thank you.
wish you all the success in your work, in your family with your country. And of course, I will be always happy to invite you again. Let's see how things develop in Venezuela.
Yes.
Let's wish also to Venezuelan people
Let's do it.
finally to live in peace, to live in just peace is not without justice. Peace doesn't exist, as we know. To live in justice and to live with really, really to live a nice life, I would say, democratic, nice life. So.